Hello and welcome to Inception Podcast Season 2. Today I have a returning guest, the one and only Mary Rodwell, who I do call the grandmother of experiences. She has collated, collected, and investigated, I would say, thousands of experiences, narratives, experiences, and done the wonderful job that many have not done by sharing it with all of us and with humanity. So, Mary, you are a returning guest to Inception Podcast. Firstly, welcome back to Inception Podcast.
Laura, it's an absolute pleasure to be back.
Lovely, lovely. So, let's just dive straight in.
Mm.
Many people are fully aware of who you are and what you have achieved. For me, to start this conversation today, I would like could you briefly take us back to how you, as an experiencer yourself, come into the realm of us weird and wonderful human beings that have these multiple experiences that no one seems to understand or wishes to know.
Well, that's a really important one, Gloria. In how did we all start
Yeah.
in this catalyst of taking us into a multidimensional reality, which is what it is
Mm-hmm.
ultimately. You are operating more than your 3D self.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it wasn't as though, I remember going up on spacecraft or whatever, um, even though people have said they've seen me up there,
Yes.
but that's another story. Um, the bottom line for me is the experience can manifest in all sorts of ways, but to get back to the fact that as a child, I was always fascinated by the weird and the wonderful. I grew up in a Catholic family, which brought in certain benefits and limits, let's put it like that, which was
Mm-hmm.
very useful ultimately. But you start questioning, and I was always questioning.
Mm-hmm.
And if I always say that if it was weird and wonderful, I had a book on it. It was one of those, anything that fascinated me that was out of the box.
Yeah.
So I think I've always had that awareness of seeking for truth, even though it was very conventional initially.
Mm-hmm.
I was a nurse and a midwife for a number of years, got married and had 3 kids. And I sort of went sideways into counseling because of the medical practice doctor said, would you be interested? And I learned about counseling, which was very early on.
Mm-hmm.
This is nearly years ago now. What I was fascinated about counseling was you were hearing people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
And if they felt safe enough with you, they would tell you more than perhaps they would tell others about their experiences. And there were a number that said, my dad visits me and tells me things, or granddad, I can sometimes see granddad or whatever. If they felt safe enough, they would actually tell you these things.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it was never a question of doubting them because it was always so useful and so helpful. It wasn't for me to say that was good or bad because it was obviously very useful to many of them in having that kind of
Mm-hmm.
connection. I was always aware, despite my, upbringing, my religious upbringing, that there was a spirit world. And I had a very open-minded mum
Mm-hmm.
who, was all into clairvoyance and healers and what have you. Despite, she said, it's all God, Mary. She used to say to me, it's all God. So, God just manifests in different ways. So she didn't have a problem with it really at all. But it fascinated me, all this unusual. But it was really, I call it my midlife crisis, leaving England and coming to Western Australia initially. But what I did was stay with the counselling and worked in grief and bereavement. And again, you're faced with your mortality
Mm-hmm.
when others are faced with their mortality
Yeah.
or had a loss, hospice, people saying to me, knowing they're going to pass on in a few years,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, a few weeks or a few months, what do you believe? So
Mm-hmm.
I constantly being opened up to what did I believe?
Yeah.
Where was the truth of things?
Yeah.
To cut a long story short, I'd had no problem with believing in the spirit world and the afterlife, etc., etc. But I hadn't really come across extraterrestrial side of it. That
Yeah.
was, I didn't really give it a lot of thought. I didn't see why it couldn't be real, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know enough about it.
Yeah.
And as you know how synchronicities happen, I ended up at a bookstore because that was my favorite place, was a book by Dr. John Mack, the professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, that
Mm-hmm.
was Abduction, Human Encounters with
Yeah.
Aliens, and Whitley Strieber's book, Communion. And I picked them
Um,
up virtually at the same time.
Whitley Strieber's book. That was the I believe it or not, I have it. I've had it for decades. It was Whitley Strieber's book for me. I'd been having these contact experiences, but I
Yeah,
thought they were all dead people. Even the ones that were little ones running around the bed, going off, I could see them. All the experiences. It wasn't in my perception, my reality. I never even heard the word UFO or anything. And
yeah,
I was Whitley Strieber's book. It was synchronistically, and it was on
mm,
when the web just started, and people were
yeah,
talking about this communion, and it kept repeating. I said, "What is it?" When I saw the picture, my whole world shattered. That's when it shattered. When I had this, they're calling it now an ontological shock. It
yeah,
was everything shattered, everything I thought was true. So, and I found over the years through interviewing and my own research that Whitley Strieber has a lot to answer for in awakening. I mean, I
mm,
still cannot read the book.
wow,
You think, well, why not? I can't. I can
wow,
now listen to Whitley on podcasts because that book had such an impact. So I do relate as yourself, the Whitley Strieber book, and I do agree with you. You're not just an experiencer because you have these blue beings or you're in craft. There are
mm,
multiple disciplines, multiple contact modalities of each
yeah.
one coming in and having the experience for us all to come together. So Whitley Strieber has a lot to answer for.
He does, but for me, the initial understanding was, well, this must be fairly rare
Mm,
because I thought I'd not heard of it anywhere else.
no, I
And of
haven't.
course, I
No.
read, any book that came along that was weird. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can come across it. And it was really this lovely gentleman who's still a good friend of mine that lives in the UK now, Ellis Taylor, who walked in my door and said, Mary, I've heard you're open-minded for this. There's no support groups for this. They just think you're a loony,
yeah,
was his
yeah.
comment. And, he sat down, he said, wake up with marks on my body, shaved areas. My partner's having experiences, the kids are having experiences. The rallies won't come to the house because they think it's demons, this kind of thing.
Mhm,
And that was it. And what do I do with that?
mhm,
And I talked about going to advanced counseling at the time
mhm,
I was learning advanced counseling, should I say,
mhm.
and took this case there. And what was fascinating was the response of the group was they all started telling me accounts of their own
Yeah,
strange experiences, which again said to me, there's a lot more going on here. And you're
yeah,
quite right about the contact modalities.
yeah,
What I've come to in my research and many others now, there are many ways you
yeah.
become the experiencer.
Yes.
And it isn't necessarily missing time
No.
or coming into the bedroom. It can be from an out of body experience that you come across these
Mhm.
beings, or it could be that you've had a near death
Yeah,
experience
yeah,
and after that, that's activated that
yeah.
awareness to see more of the non-physical world. It
Mhm.
may be, Reiki healing or some energy work that is the key to
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
Can be,
I mean, sorry to interrupt, but like in your case, and I've often wondered over the years, even when I interviewed you before, you have no conscious memory. I could be totally wrong, but for me, you have no conscious memory of this contact. However, you had this interest in the
yeah,
unknown, the weird, and the wonderful. And I've come to a greater understanding myself, not that it's my truth, is if you had that type of memory, say like me, you would not have been able to do the path that you've gone on. You had to be exactly where you were, open minded. And for me, that contact's there because even myself, there are many memories that I've not come up, but over the decades, slowly more and more, which give me the understanding, that was because of that. And that's why I didn't know that. So I've always seen you as an experiencer. You've said others have seen you on ship. I am fully aware that you are an experiencer, but you're playing your role of
yeah,
consciousness is to do what you've done, the magnificent job of what you've done in bringing the experiences together and changing the reality for us. Does that make sense to you in what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely, Gloria. And the way that I understand it is contact can happen in many different ways. And for
Yes.
me,
Mm.
I was aware that I was interacting or communicating with these intelligences
Yeah.
once I joined a particular spiritual group.
Yeah.
And it was a spiritual group, and we were really doing everything from remote healing, energy work,
Mm.
you name it, we did it. And
Mm.
of course, your guides come in,
Yeah.
and one of mine was a wonderful being
Hmm.
who was ET.
Yeah.
And so my contact was literally telepathic
Yeah.
and intuitive, whereas I would have this beautiful being told me who she was
Hmm.
and why she's with me, along with another
Hmm.
and what as well. So my contact came from being part of a metaphysical group that were all opening up multidimensionally.
Yeah.
So that was my conscious contact, if you
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
not, even though I'm very aware now there are many other ways that you're operating when you go out of body at night, and
Yeah.
you're probably doing a whole load of things
Yeah.
with these intelligences as
Yeah.
well.
Mm.
But for me, it's just knowing there are different ways that they will be interacting
Absolutely.
with you. And I agree with you that if I had been someone who was so into my own journey of
Yeah.
experiences and having some
Yes.
of the extraordinary experiences some people have,
Yeah.
I may not have been as available
Absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
do the work that I've come here to do.
Absolutely. And it shows, I mean, it shows the importance of, for me, how my perspective is, and no one is higher or lower than the other.
Yeah,
It's each one of us has an intrinsic value to
yeah,
offer. And for the story to play out, for the divine, I call it, I've done a few little docu-series called the Divine Comedy. For this to play out, each actor has to be in role,
yeah,
consciousness in each individual role. And when you can become aware of that, and that shows you, even if, and there's no even if, for example, even my part, my contribution or your contribution, it's all equal. It's all the
yeah,
same. We wouldn't be able to play if we didn't read our script and we went off script, and then it wouldn't come about. And what has happened now, where we call it an awakening, where consciousness is self-realizing and we are not alone. They've always been here, and all the rest of it, the old story. It would
yeah.
not have happened. So that's how I perceive it as well. We need Mary Rodwell, and we need other experiences. And most importantly to me, and I'd like your thoughts on this, we need experiences to be at the forefront of, I will say, there is no such thing as disclosure from a government. We experiences are the disclosure. We are the data.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are, and we need to now all come together and bring that to the forefront. How does that resonate with you?
Well, it does, because I've always believed, that this soft disclosure that's supposedly happening through governments and what have you, where they're trying to contain the narrative. I've always said real disclosure will come from the ground up.
Yeah.
It's going to come from the people that have had the experiences
Mhm.
that finally are ready to
Mhm.
share their story. And I know for many, they've almost had this feeling they shouldn't talk,
Yeah.
can't talk about it. And
Yeah.
now I'm getting them coming to me and saying, I've got to talk
Yeah.
about it now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know it's time. And people writing books, I mean, enormous numbers are writing stories,
Yes.
accounts of their experiences now. It's become almost a flood. And I have noticed very practically is the difference in the numbers that contacted me 10 or 15 years ago against now,
Mhm.
which is every single day there are
Yeah.
new people that
Yeah.
are contacting me with their experiences.
Yeah.
And right across the board, people say, certain country. I said, is there English speaking primarily? But I've got, emails from all over the world
Yeah.
where people have decided they needed to talk about it or share. And
Mhm.
it's not just a certain, it's all across the social spectrum,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
across the academic spectrum. Or,
Mhm.
they say there's special lineages of different people or whatever
Mhm.
doing it, is it, farmers and whatever. And I'm saying, no, it doesn't respect boundaries of your social boundaries, your spiritual boundaries, your cultural
Exactly.
boundaries.
It's,
It's
it's a bit like, sorry to interrupt, it's a bit like when you went to the meeting with your supervisors and, oh, look, I've got this case. Oh, well, actually, I've experienced this. It's like that. And I've found, excuse me, especially in my personal experience over the last 2 years, I now I wouldn't before, but since the near death experience a couple of years ago, I'll talk to
Mm,
anyone. And I
yeah,
find that I say, da da da. And they say, oh my God, yes, this happened. Anywhere I
yeah,
go, Mary, people are sharing. And
yeah,
excuse me, it's a repercussion of what happened. Um, they, in fact, not just sharing, they need to talk.
yeah,
There's like this compulsion. And even myself, I have this, even though I've been talking for a few years, there's a compulsion. And everywhere we go, and in my groups that I have, they're telling me that they could be at work, they could be with a neighbor, and all of a sudden
mm,
everyone's talking about it. But they
yeah,
have the, and you've mentioned it, that safe space. I think what we've arrived at now, and please tell me if you agree or please correct me, that we're in a safe space now where we can literally just share this. There is no fear. There is no, at one point, it was like with yourself, even I had to go do counseling, and it was enclosed and safe and we couldn't speak out. But for me, I'm finding others from all walks of life, like you've said, they're just speaking out. They're just
yeah.
talking in general conversation. Does that resonate at all with you, what you're experiencing?
Absolutely. I think there is a shift
Mm,
in the public persona,
mhm,
the public about what is actually going on. I think it certainly helped. There's been new openness because
mhm.
we're seeing craft all the time.
Yeah.
People are
Mhm,
talking about that
mhm.
now, the orbs and what have
Yeah.
you. More and more people from all walks of life are looking at consciousness. What is that? People are doing the shamanic route, for example. They may, try ayahuasca or whatever that opens them up, or some other thing,
Mhm.
other herb or whatever as well may actually be part of it. People are seeking a greater reality. They want to be part of something because they realize, I think intuitively, there's so much more than we're taught to believe in, which is the five senses are the only
Yeah.
things you can trust.
Mhm.
When, they're realizing that they become, they're having certain abilities and awareness, and they're fed up of hiding,
Yeah.
fed up
Yeah.
of being able, because it's so isolating. I meet so many wonderful individuals
Yeah.
that are having
Mhm.
extraordinary experiences, but saying, I've got no one to talk to.
Yeah.
There's no one I can share it with. And I'm saying, well, actually, there are millions, very likely billions of people out there that are
Yeah.
having experience, feeling exactly the same thing, not
Exactly.
realizing
Mhm.
that around you may very well be many, many people
Mhm.
having experiences as well, but
Mhm.
afraid to talk about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's about. I mean, we use terminologies because we have to otherwise it becomes intangible. So it's
Yeah,
like even for me, what I'm observing, there's a shift where um, what people are doing, the experience they're doing, they're standing in their truth for the first time. And they've always been, as reality has never allowed the truth to be out, it wasn't the right time for the truth to be out there. Um, it's sort of like underground with Mary Rodwell, so to speak, and things like that. But now it's like I'm noticing myself that other people are just standing in their truth,
yeah,
which to me denotes the level of fear is dropping. How does that resonate with you? The level of fear, before, like even myself, when I did find out from Whitney Strieber's book, I still kept it enclosed. I was fearful. I mean, my mother did try to get me locked up as a schizophrenic as a child. So I had already the background experience, but now it seems to be that fear is subsiding. It's going down as more speak out. Have you been aware of this? Have you experienced this too?
it's been a really big shift, especially in the last few years. I
Mm-hmm.
think that something really happened along with what has happened in the, in terms of the medical. We won't go into that,
Mm-hmm.
but what that has done is I think stop people in their tracks and get them to think about their lives, what's important and what matters. And it's given them, I think, an encouragement as well as a catalyst to
Mhm.
start being truthful about their lives and whatever. But I think there's frequencies that are coming to the planet, and
Mhm.
we're even doing it ourselves. We're,
Yeah.
I think, activating each other as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
And just hearing someone say something of their truth
Mm.
can be so healing for someone else who said,
Yes.
that was me, but I've never been able to talk about it.
Yes.
The problem has been the truth embargo, that
Yeah.
there's, people were, laughed at and derided and
Mhm.
mocked,
Mhm.
generally mentally ill or whatever.
Yeah.
A- And that's been the big fear. But there's almost a part of people now saying, do you know what? It doesn't matter anymore. I need to say this. I
Yeah.
need to be myself, whether you like it or not, you know?
Absolutely. So on that, so obviously, if we look at how it's playing out now, I'm going to say it no matter what. What do you think is happening now that obviously we're of similar ages going back, how we've seen it? I think I could be slightly older or a couple of years, it doesn't matter. Um, Now is the time for me that this is being, look, we don't care anymore, here we are. And then at the same time, you're seeing this, I call them the bad actors in the game, trying to
Yeah.
control the narrative. Oh, look, I mean, what I found hilarious, I had some people talk to me saying, oh my God, the government's got dog whistles and they can bring UFOs in. And I said, stop. Experiences don't need
No.
technology. Experiences, have you ever thought experiences don't need a dog whistle? And look at the terminology they're calling it, and they go, what? I said, you've had paranormal experiences. Have you ever need or you need some electronics that cost millions of dollars? No.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing that, for me, this is just my truth, as the experiences sort of rise, it's an analogy because otherwise it's intangible, that you're seeing this. And I outside, oh, we have a dog whistle and we've got a whistleblower, and I'm going, yeah, but we've been here all the time. We don't need that. And so you can see that the narrative has been trying to steer away, so the bad actors can control what is just about, which has happened, is still happening, and about to happen with these conscious beings. Does that make any sense to you at all, Mary?
Oh, it absolutely does. I mean, the interesting thing is, and I'm not knocking it at all, where you get the collection of individuals that go out into a field and call in and actually interact,
Mm-hmm.
and the vision and what have you, which is
Okay.
fine.
It's fine.
But you know what? You don't have to do that.
No, I mean, this is what I'm saying. I mean,
You can
obviously,
sit in a loud room, sit quietly, and you can connect, and that's
anywhere. I mean, it's exactly, and this is why I sort of brought back Inception podcast, is because you don't have to do that, and because this narrative is taking momentum, and I'm seeing it. It's like something was saying to me, you need to bring the other, you need to come in, as others you're doing it all the time, obviously. You can be at home. My friend took me on a holiday to Weymouth the other month, which was wonderful. And it was beautiful by the sea. It was beautiful weather, the sun, hot days, and sitting there. And I knew they were there. And I called
yeah,
her out and I said, oh, just look at that. And my God,
yeah,
she even got it on film and that. And I said, do you need a dog whistle?
yeah,
Do you need, I said, do you need to be in a specific place in even that I don't disrespect anyone that goes out and does this type of thing, but you actually don't need it. You don't
mm,
need to do that. And I think it's about longing, trying to delay the majority of humanity from reaching the point what we're talking about, when we're saying you can access it straight away. Straight away. Does that resonate with you at all?
Well, it does, but I suppose, Gloria, I'm also aware that for some people, they need to go through a kind of process
Yes,
for
they
them
do.
to
Yeah,
accept
yeah.
this is a reality. And all of that, if they
Mm.
do get to see some,
Yes,
some
I
of the
agree. Yes. Yeah.
whatever. That gives them a tangibility
Yeah.
you don't always get when you're having telepathic
No.
communications and what have you. And we sort of, as humans, we do need that tangibility often
Hmm.
to have confidence in it.
Hmm.
You can get to a point where you have that tangibility because you connect and you have a conversation. Uh,
Absolutely.
Part of the tangibility too is when people get downloads of information, they get codes, they get light language and what have you.
Exactly. Isn't that the contact modalities? There's multiple ways, but not what I'm trying to express, maybe not expressed correctly, is there's not just one contact modality that's being promoted. As you said,
Yes.
there's multiple ways that this can happen through each individual journey. That's what I'm trying to express.
And you're right, Gloria. I think the soul chooses the way it's going to happen
Yeah.
for them.
Hmm.
For some, it will be the classic,
Hmm.
being visited as a child,
Hmm.
seeing bright lights or seeing the owl outside the window
Hmm.
or whatever.
Hmm.
And that's the way that they've chosen to experience
Yeah.
their interactions with these intelligences. Others, it may be that they see a craft when they're 20 with a couple of people and that sort of activates them or whatever.
Hmm.
For others, it may come through after having a near-death experience,
Yeah.
becoming more open and
Hmm.
sensing
Hmm.
orbs and energies. So it's very much, horses for courses, isn't it?
Yeah.
The kind of thing. And that's what I think we're all that are in this field are starting to realize there's no one way.
No.
The trouble has been the nuts and boltsers, as
Yeah.
I call them,
Hmm.
want all the tangibility side of it, that literally they've got to have all that information, they've got to have the pictures, they've got to have the
Hmm.
number of sightings, they've got to have all the details and whatever to
Hmm.
give it credibility.
Yeah.
But
It's
that's
I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is a discussion I had recently about this. I
yeah,
do call them the nuts and bolters. The fact is, they are not interested. They're like in their own little box. They're not
yeah,
interested in the conscious experience, or even don't even ask the question, which I think is critical at this point. Okay, there's a craft. Let's say you've got a nuts and bolts craft. There's a visitation, but they don't use any discernment or introspection saying, oh, so what does that mean? They're fixated on the craft, or let's reverse engineer. But what does it mean to connect to another conscious, a different intelligence, what we call non human? They don't tend to go and they dismiss the conscious aspect. Does that make sense to you?
well, it's only starting to open them up at the
Mm-hmm.
moment. The
Mm.
fact that we're talking about consciousness,
Yes.
actually,
Mm.
that this is all about consciousness,
Yeah,
and that it's not just about the bright lights in the sky and
absolutely.
how and whether or not you got a picture of them or whatever.
Yeah. Mm.
I've noticed over the years, going back 30 years now, where UFO groups generally, it was those kinds of stories. Did you
Yes.
see it? Time, how big was the craft and
Yeah.
whatever. And the experiencer, they weren't too interested in the
No.
fact that they might have changed their whole way of living, their
Yeah.
whole way of seeing the
Mm.
world, the
Mm.
fact that it psychologically and emotionally and physically
Yeah.
changed them,
Mm-hmm.
because that's too weird and that's too esoteric. We just want to know, well, what time was it? Was there
Yeah.
marks that are on your body?
Yeah. Do you
Um,
have a witness?
and that's
Mm.
all of that.
Yeah.
And I think it was because, in many cases, they didn't know what to do with it
No.
when somebody started to talk about the actual experience and how it changed them,
Yeah.
because they weren't capable
Yeah.
or interested because they didn't know what it actually meant. And I always said, when you go to a UFO group, I've said it in my book, Awakening, if you want someone to document your experiences, you get a researcher. But
Mm-hmm.
if you want to understand your experiences, you go to a therapist that is open
Absolutely.
to it,
Mm.
because they're interested in your story. They're not asking you to prove everything.
No.
Your proof is in the fact that you have changed
Yes,
and you're trying to connect the dots to what does this all mean.
I'm with you.
But you don't get that with a researcher, that generally they're just interested in the nuts and bolts. So don't
It,
expect a researcher to help you with that.
I mean, to me, it's like if it seems to me it's logical. Maybe I'm biased being an experiencer, but if, you know, I'm outside, which I once in the whole of my experiences, conscious, I was outside, told to look up, and I looked up, and then a cloud dispersed, and there it was, and then the cloud masked it again. And nuts and bolters like this, I never shared with any nuts and bolters. I always kept it close to my heart for a long time. But they don't look at the effect that had on me, my psyche. So I walk out my back door. I'm just giving an example. It wasn't traumatic for me because I'd experienced it since I was a small child. But I'm just giving, because I'm obviously talking now to experiences in the group. No one's thinking what effect is on the human, that conscious being. And I think that is what's changing now, is that you've been doing this for decades, Mary, and you're being the driving force to get it to, I believe, and there are others as well, to this point where now we need to, in the forefront, put the experiencer, because it's the effect on consciousness itself, which then interacts with social determinants around it. So for me now, because of, let's say it's a shift, the social determinants around each one of us has shifted, I would say, exponentially. That's just my personal experience. And you are, as I say, the grandmother in this field. You constantly receiving experiences contacting you, this. So you now, I'm going to follow up with the question eventually, you now must see the difference in the type of experiences that are coming through, or the questions the experiencer is asking you. Is that the case at the moment?
I think to a certain extent it's shifted from a lot of the fear-based responses, because for a lot of people the fear was of the unknown. They didn't know what happened, and they thought the worst. What's happening though, also, when you work with someone for them to fully understand what's going on, that can very likely and most often changes in many cases. There's some greater awareness of their part in it, and that's part of where I can work with them as well. But there are many that have never had anything scary. What's been scary is humans. Where they'll know that I've always had this, beautiful angel with me, or this being with me that feels like family. We go to play together, and the children particularly are very open about this, and they will have wonderful experiences, so they can't understand why people are scared.
Yes, absolutely.
And that it's all been beautiful. What's been not so beautiful is the response when they've shared it to people who don't understand, because then they're seen as someone unwell in many cases, and they end up medicated or in hospital. So it's very scary then, isn't it, to share what is beautiful for you?
Yes, absolutely.
The complete opposite.
I'm in total agreement. I've never ever, and I'm telling the truth, I've never had a scary experience. I've had the big blues, the small greys, big greys, the whole gamut of it, and I've never had any fear. All the experiences that I've been shown, never had any fear. And over the years, I've heard of people that have fear. So for me, it was the research. Why there is a minority that have fears. And it happened at, I won't mention the name, but I did eventually interview the lady twice. She had an experience, and she said it was so fearful. So obviously, since me flatlining, my life has changed. I did this conversation with her, and cut a very long story short, it was her belief systems that projected the experience as fearful. But when she saw it from a slightly different perspective, which is like most experiences do over time, some are fearful at first, and then slowly they realize the positive. It wasn't as bad as they thought. And that really amplified to me about the doctrine, the belief systems, because we have to address those that say they're in fear. We can't ignore them. We need to help them to understand where that fear is coming from. Did they really have a fearful experience, or was it their projection, their beliefs? Am I making sense to you with that one, Mary?
Well, it's been one that I've talked about for many, many years. And the only way they can get to the truth of it often
Yeah,
is when they revisit that
yeah,
experience, you find out what actually happened. And I mentioned this particular story, I have done many times, of a gentleman who was very comfortable with being on the craft,
hmm
comfortable with being with the ETs and what have you. But his biggest concern was there was still a fear that he said, I've hung on to. And it's usually when one of the beings comes very close to
yeah,
me and the eyes coming closer. And he says, and I just shake in fear. And he said, I don't know what to do about it.
hmm
So I said, so shall we find out what happened then? Because he
hmm
didn't know. Because I said to him, what do you think happens? And he says, well, I just feel like maybe I'm being taken over or something, but I don't know.
hmm
I just know that I get really, really stressed and fearful when that happens.
hmm
Where I literally took him slowly to the point where he was bringing in this being's eye closer and closer to him and getting more and more stressed as he was doing so.
hmm
Then all of a sudden, as the eye's getting so close, he completely relaxes.
hmm
And I said, so what happened? And he said, he says, they're just giving me information. So that was a way of transmitting data to him. And
Yeah,
he thought they were coming and taking him over, which they
absolutely,
weren't. And
exactly.
this, and often it's when you can take somebody to the experience so
Yeah,
they can see for themselves, they realize that often it's their fear of what might have happened or
absolutely.
could have rather than what really did happen.
Yeah.
And that can be life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, it's earlier on. That sounds arrogant, as I said. What I said earlier on is I'm noticing now. Yeah, the experiences like that working through because we have to include in all the contact modalities the ones that experience fear. So we need to be there to support that network of it. I'd like to add something extra to this, just to throw out there is we spoke earlier on about sometimes some people some experiences need to see a craft, they need to go through their soul's journey goes a certain way, which I'm in total agreement with. However, I wonder if you noticed or been aware of, I'm aware of that A to B, because there is no time and space, but the A to B, that journey is now how do I you could say speeded up or accelerated, that it's not needed as much because I'm noticing some people coming as experiencers and they have not had to go through the long, like I
Yeah.
did for 66 years. Okay. Am I making sense to you? It's very hard to articulate this.
Oh, I think you're making a lot of sense, Gloria. And what I would say to you is that it's about the generational shift
Yes.
that
Yeah.
whereas the older generations have been really a lot of the time not been given any way of
Mm,
sharing and
mm, mm,
articulating it and living
mm.
in two worlds as it almost is.
Yeah.
Whereas each generation has been that little bit more open, that little bit more aware
Mm,
until you get to, the 30s and the 20s, and of course the younger ones that are
yeah.
walking, that are being born, that are aware of where they come from, what their mandate is, and are perfectly open and what have you with it.
Mm,
So it seems to be that there's been an acceleration
mhm,
of the program, whatever that you want to
mm.
say about the program,
Yeah.
which is about, waking up humanity.
Mm,
And it's been slowly speeding up to the point where now a lot of the older stuff, the older things um, that people were talking about, has now it isn't necessary.
no.
It's like we're beyond that point now.
And I'm in the total agreement. And this is why this time around, I definitely wanted you to return because what you've just raised there is a segue into you are, and you're the only one I know at the moment. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't others. You are at the point and have all the information of the younger generation coming through, whether you call them star seeds or star children. You have that data, you have that information, you have that awareness. So I'd love to take it if we could step into that. I think it quite aptly as the next generation. What are they telling you, Mary, about our experience now?
Well, the ones that are coming in now are, avatars. To be honest, they're teachers. They've come in
Yeah,
to help us understand. And so I say it's almost like we're going to go into the reverse of what we call education,
yeah,
spiritual education, because we'll be taught by them.
yeah.
Our job is to and nurture that and to
Mm-hmm.
nurture a safe space, but they're coming in to show us how it's done
Mm-hmm.
because they're already awake and having the understanding behind it as well. When you talk to a 7-year-old, it explains to you that she's a hybrid, that she's
Mm-hmm.
part blue avian, part human,
Mm-hmm.
that she's come in as a healer,
Mm-hmm.
and she explains how she heals others and then activates them to heal themselves.
Mm-hmm.
She's bringing in the light language and what have you, and explaining her role and why she's come. This is a 7-year-old perfectly comfortable
Mm-hmm.
with what she's telling you.
Mm-hmm.
There is no fear about it. And she's quite happy to explain and show you what she's doing. She's one of so many now that are being born on the planet that
Mm-hmm.
are bringing in this new awareness. Some are communicating with plants, some with animals, some with crystals.
Mm-hmm.
I had a beautiful video of a 6-year-old explaining how the meteorite was actually talking to him and telling him where it came from and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother said, well, how is this meteorite communicating with you? And he said, oh, in my head, in my mind.
Yeah,
It's
telepathy.
telling me this, it's telling me that, and it's telling. There was no hesitation, there was no concern about
Mm-hmm.
it, whatever. They're aware that sometimes they get taken back home,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll often say, this isn't my real home.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a home and it's not here. And I've got another, they'll often talk about the fact that they are hybrids. I remember one calling herself a water person, part human, part water person,
Mm-hmm.
and she comes from a water planet. And when she looks in the mirror, she's seeing the water part of herself, the hybrid side of herself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was explaining something really fascinating. I was listening to how she described how she translate music in a way that she said it's not just that she hears it,
Mm-hmm.
she follows the frequency to the origin of it, and
Wow,
she can actually feel the emotions and understanding of the person who's created the music. So she
absolutely
takes
amazing.
a whole new level of
Yes.
understanding, in terms of what, we look at that and we think, well, it's that, it's like the term synesthesia,
Yeah.
which used to be considered, an aberrant behavior when you can not just see the letter
Yeah.
seven, but you can feel it. It
Feel
has a
the feeling. Yeah,
it can almost communicate with you. Oh, well, that's weird. That's straight. No, it isn't. It's actually more of our abilities to
absolutely.
actually touch into what is called consciousness.
Um, if I could add there, it reminds me, obviously everyone now knows about the telepathy tapes. And it's mentioned in there about their type of telepathy is, I call it, I've experienced it, many other experiences, it's holistic telepathy.
Yeah.
You don't just, I mean, I don't get words, it's the emotion, it's the image, it's complete. The whole context is within. And I think that's what you're referring to when you're talking about how this child says it's not just this, it's that, it's all the senses and more. It is, let I would say, it's telepathy, but it's holistic. It's the complete experience. And I'm fully aware from the beings, that's how they express themselves, how they work. It's holistic. Um, and obviously it's sure filled with the children. And you are seeing more and more children now coming and expressing in this way. So on the segue of that, we are aware that with consciousness, if we go into a room and there's a negative Nelly from hell, we go, I'm leaving the room. Yeah. Imagine if you're encountering, and yourself, you're very fortunate that you're encountering the energy of these children. Now we're talking about the younger generation now. Just by being in that frequency of consciousness in itself will shift others. Does that resonate with you at all?
It absolutely does, Gloria. And I think they've come with the frequencies coming from all over the
Mm,
cosmos,
mm,
both also dimensionally as well. Many of them have talked about coming from other dimensions and what have
mm,
you.
mm,
Body frequencies of that place, that part of the universe, with the skills that they have, and they're bringing all of those frequencies here. And of course, because they're amongst us, we pick up those frequencies as well, because it's, we're sharing frequencies all the time with those around us, and they're activating, they're awakening individuals all around them, even though it's not something that they're not always consciously aware of. Certainly the people receiving them may not be consciously aware of them, but actually ultimately it is activating them as well. And I think it's all to do with the dormant DNA that we hear about time and time again. We only use what, 5% of our DNA, when DNA, there's 95%, they still don't know what it does. And yet we know that 1 gram of DNA can actually contain all the information in the internet, just 1 gram. So what on earth is the rest for? Well, I believe it's contains everything that we ever need, that's going to assist us to be what we really are ultimately going to be, which is a new human, and an activated human that is going to have abilities and talents that I think we can't even begin to understand yet.
I'm in total agreement. I'd like to jump back to about the DNA and your thoughts. Obviously, coming from my awareness, I mean, no one has the truth. This is why talking and communicating is so important, that we can have, maybe, even if it's a philosophical discussion, is when you talk about the DNA, if you don't look at it as in a materialistic, from a materialistic or even human perspective, the DNA, I mean, I've noticed the change in myself over 66 years. And on a few occasions, there have been severe illnesses that should not have been cured. Let's put it that way. So something's going on with the DNA, but more of that is, for me, the DNA. Do you feel that it's possible, it's through the energy, and I don't see DNA as a physical, I'm trying to sort of say this with clarity, but if you look at the DNA as everything is frequency, okay, everything is a rock, everything. So the DNA is entwined. So there's specific frequencies that make the DNA. So we're going metaphysical or scientific now. That through that DNA, we can and we do experience, let's say, portals or dimensions. Are you understanding what I'm saying? And do you have anything to say on that?
Oh, absolutely. There's the science behind it. There's some wonderful info. And I've talked about that for many, many years. There's 2 scientists in Russia that actually demonstrated the fact that DNA is holographic in nature and creates portals. And the reason that we have intuition and we get information and we can operate in these multidimensional ways is because of our DNA acting like portals to other dimensions and other realities and what have you. So that's how we actually do it, is through that aspect of DNA, which is the portal ultimately. So we're all portals.
All portals, yeah. It's, for me, it's only over the last few years, as experiences have changed, and it used to be a lot of science when I was younger, a hell of a lot of science, astrophysics, and then other experiences come in, and then it's come back to the science again. And I'm quite used to it switching. But the potentiality of us conscious beings is the realization of our true potentiality, our truth. And if you look at how, let's call them the bad actors that will manipulate the DNA, genetic modification, even in the food, do affect the DNA. I mean, for God's sake, in the UK, I don't know if you know, Mary, in the UK, the wonderful, wonderful UK, your homeland, they're now feeding cow stuff to stop them farting. Okay, and because it's bad for the environment. And when you I mean, it's a bit like Monty Python at the moment in the UK. It's I'm watching the Monty Python show, and if you look at it, the logic, but you see actually what they're doing. However, personally, with the DNA and the manipulation in the food, genetically modified, it's all to hit the DNA. But that's part of the play. That's part of consciousness coming through what it's going through. Is that resonating with you?
I think that what we're being challenged to do now is to see what's going on in true clarity.
Yes, absolutely.
and actually start doing something about it, which is taking responsibility for what's going on,
Absolutely.
standing up and saying, you know what, this is not okay. And I think we actually need, sometimes we don't change until we're backed against backed
Yeah,
against the wall.
yeah,
And I think being backed against the wall so that we stand up and say, you
yeah,
know what, this is not okay.
yeah,
And, start doing something about it. And this is about, yeah, having the courage to do that
yeah,
because we've been programmed to obey, to
yes,
follow I mean, everything from the very beginning, whether it's religion, education, and whatever,
yeah,
everything's about putting us in the box and
yeah,
keeping us in the box. And if it gets ridiculous enough,
yeah.
it's daft
That's when it
enough.
will happen. To me, I think if you can start to seeing, this is my perspective, you start seeing, I mean, I remember lockdown and when it happened, and I went, it's hilarious. It's Monty Python. It's about seeing it as it's ridiculous. It's not logical. It's irrational. And I think millions of people are now starting to see that. And when you also can perceive it that way, how illogical to try and stop a cow farting. Um, I think that's when awakening occurs. Because instead of being fear based, like, oh my God, maybe, I don't know, even 10 years ago, if they did it then, people have gone, oh my God, yeah, we need to stop the cows farting. Oh my God, they're killing us, they're killing us. They would have believed that. Now we're all laughing and going, nah, game up.
Well, the great thing with what happened, even though it's very dark and it's still
Mm.
having a huge impact, it did wake a lot of people up at the
Yes,
same time
absolutely. Yeah,
because people were suddenly faced with not only their mortality,
yeah,
but faced with certain rules and disciplines which actually were ludicrous in many ways because they weren't based in any kind of science,
no,
but being forced to stay at home, being forced to look at themselves and their life and what was actually going on, gave them time to
yes,
actually say, you know
yes,
what, this is not making any sense. This is
exactly.
logical.
Exactly. I mean, there was such a plus from lockdown. I remember one in the UK, guys. There was one law in the UK, and it said if you're in a relationship and you don't live together, so boyfriend and girlfriend, you cannot visit each other to have romantic liaisons, but you can go in a car park in your car. And I said, isn't that crossing decency? Is that against the law? And I was going, no, you can't do my elder children. Don't you dare do that because it's crossing decency. What if there's children? And I agree with you. It was because we were kept still
Yeah.
without all the entertainment, and then
Yeah.
they come in with these draconian ways of trying to whatever they were doing. It was Monty Python, and the big foot come down, and everyone was seeing this. It gave us time to sit back and, well, who am I? What
Yeah.
am I like when I'm still? Mm. And space, and I am aware within that period of time, if you didn't get involved with the entertainment that was going on outside, many experiences or even new experiences, it was happening in lockdown in the silence,
Yeah.
because it's within that silence speaks. It's within that, so the benefits far outweighed the negatives of that experience. And also now it's been proven what it was, but we're not going to go down that road. But we're talking about the shift, and I'm in total agreement. The lockdown was, to me and many others, Monty Python. You what? But we were unaware of these draconian laws or this. We were unaware. We were just
Yeah.
going on blindly. We were blind, deaf, and dumb. And all of a sudden, that makes sense. For the first time, we started to take responsibility and say, no. And I think and I will stand in my truth. And I think it was through that period where you're quite right, humanity was getting so oppressed, it was meant to happen, that we popped and said, no, we're not doing this no more. Does that make sense to you?
I think it was a big wake-up call.
Yeah. Mm.
Uh, and I mean, some of the images of people being so afraid
Yes.
of breathing somebody else's air and what have you, to seeing musicians with a mask on with a hole where they're actually
Yeah.
blowing through, and thinking, really? Really?
I know.
You know, is that really what you think you're doing and whatever? And it was hilarious.
It was, and I laughed, and not at them, but at the
No,
situation. I mean, there were people inside their cars on their own, covered up.
yeah, I know.
Inside their car, there was not
No,
another human being. Um, and yeah, and we had to, I think that the collective whole of humanity, this was in the script. We had to, this was a wake up call to see. I mean, I call it the divine comedy. That's my experience. It's portrayed to me as a divine comedy. It's one consciousness, all parts of the whole, all now. It's, and each part playing a role, and it's humorous, it's fun. Once you get out of the fear. But that for me was a major catalyst where you're going, oh, it's a load of crap. What am I doing? Why am I here? And people go, why am I here? Why, what? And boom. So I'm in, I think from then, and also the children born through lockdown.
yeah.
That were the children themselves. Many people said, oh, the children suffered. The children especially under the age of 7, are already not in this world anyway. So I think it was good for them not to have that doctrine, the conditioning. I think there was a benefit even in with the children. How do you feel about that?
Well, I
Because they
think
had no education, did they?
that's right. The less they're programmed, the better.
Yes,
And if they miss out on some of that programming, I think that's got to be of a benefit, and it gives them an
absolutely.
opportunity way. Because that's the problem is all the programming and the
Yeah,
propaganda that programming and whatever, because they want good little workers that are going to do as they're told and follow
yes,
the rules for
yes,
their life.
yes.
Don't be different, for goodness sake. Don't think laterally, whatever. Don't do
Don't
any
even
of that.
think for yourself.
No.
Don't have an opinion. I mean, we've seen that shift now. And you see it with children. Obviously, I have 6 children and numerous grandchildren and another one on the way. But the difference in my grandchildren, even for my older grandchildren, I've noticed the difference. So I've got mature grandchildren, 18, 20, and I've got toddler grandchildren, and they're talking like they shouldn't talk.
Yeah.
And they leave voicemails for grandma, 4-year-old, asking me, grandma, tell me about the moon, please. So I tell him about the moon. How do they know that I know that I'm experiencing that? So I have to project that out. That's happening everywhere, and the one that knows about that is you, Mary. No pressure going on here, because you get that contact. But I'm personally experiencing it for my grandchildren, the small ones.
Yeah. I think they know where to be born,
Yeah,
and families to be born in. And I
yeah,
think if it's not the parents that are aware, it's the
yeah.
grandparent. It's not always the mum and dad.
No,
I connect with, some clinical psychologists that work with children,
yeah,
educators and what have you. They're all star seeds that are recognizing the star seeds. I've even met midwives that say that they're birthing the star kids and what
yeah,
have you, and know that job and whatever. So under the radar are all these wonderful souls that are helping from different generations
yeah.
right through to the latest ones that are actually coming in. And what we saw with the telepathy tapes demonstrates very much a new way of being,
Yes,
and their abilities. But of course, many star seeds who are not autistic are telepathic, and
yes,
often they don't. And I remember a young man telling me that him and his sister used to communicate telepathically until one day she told him to stop being lazy and start speaking.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that is common. I mean, me and my elder sister as children, I have memories of teenager doing telepathy with the elder sister. It was normal. And when she came to see me when I came out of hospital 2 years ago, um, she said, you do know you were doing it when you were 2 or 3. I went, what? I don't. Because she's 10 years senior to I. And I said,
Yeah,
really? She said, you were doing it all the time.
yeah.
Telekinesis, all levitate, all this telepathy. And I obviously, that wasn't a part of the memory that I was to recall. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I get that. But I'm on the back of that, there's another segue in, coming from my personal experience, how I was as a child, growing up the teenage years, all through adulthood, and how it changed. It's like it's gone a full circle, but this time, instead of like myself being conditioned in, or all of us being conditioned in, it's not happening. Am I making sense to you? Now they're being brought and it's not happening. There's no condition. They won't go through the same journey as our generation has gone through. Does that resonate with you?
Well, it absolutely does. I think that we were born at a time where we were probably creating the kind of bridge
Yeah,
between the old and, whereas the bridge now is complete
yeah.
in the sense we've now got the new generations that are already set
Mm.
up. They don't need to have that. I
No.
think we're still there for the older models,
Yeah,
but still need a bit of hand holding probably
yeah.
to give confidence to be what the young kids are already
Mm-hmm.
embodied in that awakened, activated state. So absolutely, it's a different ball game
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
generations coming in now.
I think if you recognize that, I mean, I don't have to talk through it. I just go with the flow. I normally ask them, I say, help me out, guys, because I don't know the answer. And I'll get the answer because it's way and above um, my identity's capacity to understand. But on that, I mean, to bring this conversation to a close, no pressure to you, Mary, with all that we spoke about and the point that we've just left. What's next? What do we do now? Um, where do we go now? What's your vision, or what should we do? I'm throwing it all at you because obviously not putting pressure on you and passing the buck. It's a fact that you spent decades now in constant contact with all contact modalities. Okay.
Mm.
So I have my own contact modalities. So the group, the people in my groups, experiences, I'm aware of just them. So I'm very limited with contact modalities. Okay. But as to yourself, you're not. So I can ask you, what's next, Mary? Where are we at? Is there an event, as my experiences are telling me, that is upon us?
I think we're very close to an event, whatever that event is.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the moment very hard to conceptualize, and that's what I've been told. Don't try and work it out, Mary, because
We've
you're not.
been told the same. Don't try. Yeah.
So you're just gonna. So it's more about knowing that everything's on track
Yeah.
for whatever it is needs to happen as the next step for humanity.
Okay.
And it could happen tomorrow, it could happen next week, it could happen next year.
Yeah.
But I've been told that it's very much sooner rather than later.
I hope it's sooner than later, obviously, because physical age in the experience, my role, it's been the longest journey. But it seems every time I think it's time, oh, I'm getting older now, something happens
Mm.
and I'm shifted somewhere else. I mean, I've had 3 near-death experiences and I'm going, and after the last one, I said, whatever I need to learn, I will learn it. Don't do that again. But I can see the game,
Yeah.
but I'm here for the long haul, it seems. I'm aware the physical body could be absolutely dead and I'm still going to be here because I feel there's something. And even in the recent event in the hospital, when, all the alarms are going off and 2 beings come. And
Yeah.
either they said, or someone said, it's not your time yet. I went, okay. And it shifted again. So for me, talking to you, Mary, is a crucial part of understanding my own contact experience, my contact modality. And for me now, we're not individual experiences. I can't emphasize this enough. we're all part of a puzzle. I can't work without you or them, or they can't work without them. It's about us coming together. So none of us knows the truth. I will say, if anyone says they know the truth, just please walk away. But you talk to experiences, and once you start speaking, the truth is revealed. Does that make sense to you through the collective? So before we end today, would you like to add anything else to support what we spoke about?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for giving me the chance to chat with you again and to share in the way that we have, because I think ultimately what helps everyone is when we start sharing our own personal resonance to information and what have you, and giving a chance to be exposed to as much as possible. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. And the other thing is to know that you've got it within you to get your answers, that you don't need to go outside of yourself at all, really. You just need to know, resonate to ultimately within that self. You've got that ability. Everyone has it. We're born with it. It's all part of who we are. So learn to trust yourself and to trust that awareness that you have within you.
That is beautiful. And I would just like to add, as the speakers in the telepathy tape says, as any experiencer will tell you, why you're not alone. Telepathy is a two-way communication. And speak to somebody, talk to a friend, even about, what do you think about this? That's what I find. People say, they normally come very sort of cautiously, well, what do you think about this? And I go, yeah, go on, yeah. And it's about communication. Stand in your truth, no matter what it is. Speak your truth. I highly recommend you find Mary Rodwell, especially on YouTube. She's all over the place. But before we go, Mary, please could you just share your books if anyone wishes? I'm sure they've all read your books, but keep going. And what is your future project?
Well, in brief, you can find me on, just Google me, and I'm on Facebook, I'm on Telegram, I'm on a number of sites as well. And my website, of course, is discern.com.au. There's others as well. So you can find me fairly easily. My books, I think the first one, Awakening How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life, is really a manual for those that are waking up and wanting to do with, what do I do about the fear? Or how do I know this is all those kind of questions? And that's why it was written. The second one is more about the bigger picture, and it's the children as well as the adults, and where are we going as a species and what have you as well. Lots of stories, personal stories, and none of it's edited in the sense that it's not censored as they're, because that's what needs to be said. And other than that, I'm very happy if anyone's got any queries or things they know or understand, get in touch. I'm available. So that's about it, really. In terms of the future, at the moment, I'm not going anywhere very fast this year. I'm really very, very busy with my work. So I haven't gone to many events, but that's this year. Still with a lot of researchers working on new information.
Which is wonderful, wonderful. Well, on that note, thank you once again. And I do hope you'll be a returning guest again and share any updates, especially on this topic around the children, especially. And to the viewers, thank you very much for watching Inception Podcast. It's been wonderful. And you can find us on YouTube. I'm not going to do the YouTube thing, like and whatever, but I'm hoping if the conversation between me and Mary, even if it's helped one of you to be able to stand in your truth and maybe have a conversation, then it's worth it. Thank you once again. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.